Welcome to Industry Ignited, the podcast where we spark bold conversations with the leaders, innovators, and problem solvers shaping the future of industry, manufacturing, and B2B business. I'm your host, Dr. Leeanne Aguilar. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Sara Beth Raab, award-winning Fractional Chief Events Officer at SV Events. Sara Beth is known for tackling some of the most complex challenges in the event world, whether it's designing global trade shows, producing citywide activations, or orchestrating C-suite level strategy for B2B organizations. What sets her apart is her ability to connect the dots between strategy, marketing, and execution, ensuring events just don't happen, but truly move the needle on growth, culture, and relationships. From creating neurodiverse-friendly trade show strategies to exploring how AI reshapes event planning, Sara Beth brings a fresh lens to how events drive measurable and meaningful business outcomes. Sara Beth, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Leanne. I'm so glad to be here.
I'm glad to have you. So, Sara Beth, you pioneered the concept of a fractional chief events officer. Can you share what inspired you to step into this role and how it supports organizations differently than a traditional events manager?
Yes. So what I have noticed in the industry is, you've got your marketing team, and sometimes the events team will fall underneath the marketing team. You've got your communications team, and sometimes the events will fall under your communications team. I've noticed in the industry there was a tendency for organizations to have a marketing communications person together. What we're noticing now a lot is you'll have a chief marketing officer and you'll have a chief communications officer. And you're starting to see a shift in organizations understanding that events do take specific specialties. And it does make a lot of sense for them to kind of have their own lane and with their colleagues in the communications and in the marketing world. You also see, of course, events folks under the HR world, right, where they're doing internal events. So really, the industry isn't quite ready, it doesn't seem, for a chief marketing officer in a way that is permanent and forever. But I have definitely noticed and had many opportunities where I've come in as a fractional chief events officer that kind of help outline the entire organization's event strategy depending on what their goals are.
Right. I mean, events are big productions. Especially if it's a large organization that does multiple events,
right,
throughout the year. And I know events can scale according to where you're at and the complexity of what you're wanting to put on.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, tell us a little bit more about what you've managed, because I know you've managed everything from global trade shows to really complicated healthcare activations. What do you enjoy most about working in these high complexity environments?
So I've had a really 360 view of the events industry. I've had situations where I've been on the venue side and had high volume as a venue. And then I've also been on the large scale citywide conference world. And then I've also come in as a fractional chief events officer for a big healthcare initiative that gathered about 5,000 people. So I've really have done everything in between. What I really love is, and so I always say that my specialty is not in a specific industry and not in a specific event. My specialty really does lie in the complexity and finding that complexity and kind of taking that nest of yarn and organizing it and creating the tapestry of whatever the events were supposed to be. Whether it's the strategy for the year or the strategy for this one particular event, what gets me really excited is when I'm able to come with decision makers and make a decision on what that strategy needs to be and how it points directly to a problem that we're trying to solve through the event management or through the event itself.
So what defines complexity when it comes to an event?
It's a good question. So to me, an event can be complex because of its scale, So one of the events I used to manage was 11 days. It had about 150,000 square feet of event space, about 11 to 12,000 room nights. And of course, it lasted that long time, over 11 days, and it gathered about 3,000 to 5,000 people. Obviously, that's complex. There's a logistics involved. It was for an organization that did bridge tournaments. So you've got complexity in the fact that it's very much like the NBA, where there are specific rules and specific ways, but then within that container, you've also got 45 events. And then me and my team were in charge of all of it, and then everything down to the bottom pieces. But you can also have a really complex event with a small amount of humans in the room. The complexity is in what the achievable outcome is. So say we're making a decision, we're trying to get input from individuals so that we can make better decisions on our products moving forward. So who do we need in that room? What questions do we need to ask? And all of those things, that can make an event very complex. Another thing that can make an event very complex is the work that I did with St. Jude Global Pediatric Medicine. They brought in 6 different countries. There were complexities in language barriers. It was World Health Organization and UNICEF. It also happened during Ramadan. So you have the considerations of religious requirements, dietary requirements. So complexity can also be in volume, right? Like we've got to execute 100 events this month. So how are we going to implement these 100 events this month? So it really does depend. In my mind, complexity is just when it's nuanced and it's multidimensional, depending on what's going on.
All right. Yeah. So it's multifaceted and it can mean a lot of different things. Yeah. Thank you for that in-depth explanation. How has your experience across industries, from healthcare to luxury to research, shaped your approach to event strategy?
So one thing I have noticed is that regardless of industry, events always need to evolve. That's number one. Also, regardless of industry, you're dealing with humans in person. And so that is, everybody has a nuance within their environments and within their audiences. But the most important thing is to understand that you are working with humans and individuals and ultimately trying to establish connections. That's definitely the foundation for all events, is all events in general are trying to establish connections, whether it's to celebrate, whether it's to sell, whether it's to create relationships. Events are all relationship building opportunities in general.
And in your view, what makes a trade show or large-scale event strategically successful for specifically like industrial and B2B companies?
In general, I think that making sure that you take a step back and understand what problems you're trying to address through this gathering. So one of the things I like to say all the time is, don't go looking for apples when you went and planted orange seeds. So sometimes individuals will look at their past trade shows and be like, well, these just don't work. Well, what were you trying to accomplish at these trade shows? Did you expect a logo on a thing was going to make your deals? That's another thing I always say, a logo on a thing does not a deal make. So you've really got to look at, okay, what problems are we trying to solve by having this gathering? Why are we here? We no longer have the luxury of just going to a thing because we've always been there. There are nuances there that we really need to discover before we implement our event strategy. So we really need to take a step back, rewind, and address what we're trying to accomplish by gathering.
So we've had the same experience when it comes to guiding clients through having successful events. Because with my marketing company, we'll do events, and we're more on the design side and producing the things with the logos, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. They have to go into it with a purpose. They have to have specific outcomes that they're wanting to realize. And if they don't have that strategy, if they don't know who they're going to meet, what the message that they want to communicate is, and how they're going to capture leads, and which presentations they're going to go to in order to get the specific information, then it's kind of ineffective, I suppose.
Absolutely. So you really have to set up that strategy and understand the why behind the what. It
Yeah.
really makes a big difference. And it's going to impact as soon as you make those. I like to make mission statements. So as soon as you make that mission statement, you can make the decision about what promotional items you want to have, what, everything can point back up to that strategy. And that strategy can be a 5-year strategy. It can be a one-off strategy. It can be as macro or as micro as you want it to be. But it definitely will impact all the minor decisions that you're going to make throughout the event production process.
Right. That makes sense. I like that. You're having a mission statement that you take into the event. That's a really, good approach. And like you mentioned, not all of the outcomes are immediate. And I think sometimes people will go to a trade show thinking that, oh, we're going to walk away and have all this new business or meet all these new, clients. And that's not necessarily, the case. It doesn't, like with any kind of marketing, it's not an overnight deal when it comes to realizing results. So this leads into my next question. You've talked about addressing squishy metrics like trust, relationship building, brand perception that often don't show up in ROI spreadsheets. How can companies measure and prioritize those intangible outcomes?
Yeah, and it's funny. I call them squishy because I consider squishy to be emotive based solutions that we're trying to come up with. And in mine, there are 2 tiers. Sometimes the squishy is the problem that the sales team keeps on hearing. So their no's. If an organization is consistent, or various organizations are consistently telling them no, and what those no's are, that's a problem that can be addressed through your in-event activations. So or you can find out what the squishy problems are through really well-crafted surveys of your potential clients or your current clients. So sometimes the events can address those, like the squishy problems. One example I'll give is once upon a time when I was in the student housing development world, part of the decision makers, this was a very long sales cycle type organization. They brought their private equity onto university campuses. And so before an RFP would come out, it would be years and years and years. You've got your decision makers. You've got your VP of finance and all of the people that you typically think of, but you also have your VP of student affairs. And one of the squishy problems that this organization had was the VP of student affairs might not like an organization if they feel like they're going to take away their jobs. So this organization was coming in and they essentially would do a land lease and build up, like in University of Kentucky, they knocked down and rebuilt 6,000 beds. So one of the issues was, that no with the student affairs folks. And so we dove in through surveys, through conversations, through understanding from the sales team what exactly the problem is. So as an event strategist, the absolute worst thing for me to do, having known what that no is, was for me to slap my logo on the big event at the big conference that showed that we're just in it for the money. That would actually amplify and reconfirm the no, which is the problem. So we had to come up with a different strategy. And ultimately, the strategy was for me to go to this convention and create a custom opportunity, because what the organization had was we were all in it together. They still allowed, the student affairs folks were still involved in the student housing projects. Student affairs folks were still running the same programming, but we had to alleviate that fear and create that trust. So the opportunity in the trade shows needed to not be a logo on a thing. We don't need to be the name behind the big event. We needed to create something special, and we created this round table discussion moment that would ultimately implement white papers on the student housing industry from the student affairs perspective. And that organization was simply a seat at that table. This was over 10 years ago, and this relationship still exists today, now owned by the organization that bought out the company I was working for. But it just showcases you can get creative to address the squishy.
Yeah.
In a trade show environment that's more than that on, brochure media kit that you get for every trade show. So if you understand what you're trying to do and the no's that your sales team is having, you can address those through that in-person environment in a very strategic and pinpointed way that ultimately results in really, really beneficial results.
I think that's a amazing example, right? And it's counterintuitive too, because you always think, oh, well, we're going to get brand recognition and positive, marketing from putting our logo everywhere, where sometimes it can actually, have the opposite effect when the need is, and when it comes to, it's like not about the money. It's not about the, financial, aspects. It's more about developing that trust.
Yeah. And that's that squishy.
That safe space, that place where people, it's like, okay, they don't have these ulterior motives. They're here to really, listen and be a support. So, yeah.
And then another thing that I think about with the events too is to be really careful, because sometimes an organization's whole purpose is existing in that squishy. So maybe their whole purpose is relationships, trust, shared values, and belonging, kind of like consultants. So if your organization is a consultant, and so it's very B2B consultant based, then the whole goal of the event is to not contradict that business objective. So if so you can do that in really bad ways, interesting ways, where say you're touting the fact that we're partners, and then you have a hosted event, and all you do is put your heads of your organization on stages and talk down to the audience. Mm-hmm. That does not imply partnership. That implies listen to us. We know it. We know everything. You need to listen to us because we're the expert. That's not the squishy. Now you're contradicting what your ultimate brand is as an organization by your event execution. So you can address, and then you can also be very, very careful about how you're addressing or contradicting your brand in the events with how you're executing.
Oh, that's such good, food for thought as well, right? Really super important to think about, making sure you're not contradicting. Your own purpose. And because appearance is everything. I mean, this is like your or a big opportunity to get in front of your target audience in person and make a bigger impact than normal, than through digital marketing, let's say. Mm-hmm. And the last thing you want to do is contradict yourself and your purpose.
Right. And that can manifest in these really small ways in event execution, which is another reason I highly recommend organizations put in their brand and style guide how they want to gather to do an event brand and style guide. For example, if you're a global organization, you need to put in your brand and style guide so that all your vendors know about potential conflicts in dietary concerns. Like you need to make sure that you have halal dietary considerations if that you have a global audience. There's a lot of things, if you are thinking going through all of your event production points, that you can accidentally contradict what you're trying to do just by not being considerate to the needs of the
right. Oh, that's a really good point too. And even beyond that, maybe cultural norms or expectations if you're presenting at conferences internationally as well, just considering how your brand and communication. I teach a marketing course and go through, there's a chapter on that where it talks about examples of these missteps and cultural fails, when it's come to marketing communication, not realizing how a message it translates even in another, to another culture.
Right. So. And all of that also happens in person. So, there's a lot of that brand and style guide really, really does help. So if you do hire an event production team in, so they know what your standards are, because you don't want to accidentally stumble upon something just having not known. So having a brand and style guide for your events management processes and procedures is really, really beneficial.
Super important, because even major brands have had big fails when it comes to
Right.
the miscommunications and not representing because they didn't know.
Yep.
Because they didn't have that in place.
Mm-hmm.
And you've also been thoughtful about designing events that support neurodiverse participants. Can you share how leaders can make in-person activations more inclusive and impactful?
Yes. So I think of being considerate of individuals' needs as making sure that you understand that barriers to connection are ultimately what you're trying to remove. So you can take a step back and acknowledge that you don't have to accommodate everybody's potential barriers to connection. I do really highly recommend for organizations to look at their data points and to look at their audience, and if we are being wise, look at the numbers and say, okay, if 10% of these individuals are, say, neurodiverse or what have you, or 10% of them are of the Jewish faith, or whatever the potential barriers to connections might be, if you lost that 10% in sales, would that negatively impact your business development goals? So I like to think about it from a data standpoint. Yes, we are all kind. Yes, we all want to be kind to individuals that come to our events. But really look at the data so that you can make sure that you're being very purposeful about those moments. So with that being said, when you have that data, then you can be considerate of individuals' needs. And remember that these are just removing the barriers to connection. So when I was in the research world, there was a significant portion because we're providing services specifically for individuals that were researchers. So in the trade show environment, a very simple thing that we implemented was an activation moment with our swag. We had to build a Lego person, so they can customize and build a Lego person, because a lot of individuals that are neurodivergent, eye contact is uncomfortable, and they actually listen better and while they have something to work with in their hands, and they are no longer forced to have the eye contact moment, because a lot of the times individuals will mask. And instead of listening to all those wonderful things that your sales folks are saying, they are masking and wondering and feeling insecure and wondering, okay, am I playing listening really well? And they're not hearing what's being said necessarily. So there are different things that you can do specifically to help remove those barriers. And it's simple, but it's considerate.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. And have you seen the Venn diagram that actually shows neurodivergency, and it includes like ADHD and it includes giftedness, which I had never realized until recently, that giftedness is neurodivergence too. And so even when you're in front of a crowd with highly intelligent people, a lot of who might fall within that giftedness, section of the diagram, that is neurodivergence. And so considering their needs and what, it intersects. I mean, there's a overlap between, ADHD and the other characteristics of autism and that spectrum as well. But what are their needs? What do they need to stay engaged? What's going to capture their attention and keep them interested?
Yeah, and I think a lot of the times we slip into this mode of making the assumption that everybody's extroverted, neurotypical, and a lot of the times alcohol drinking. So, we tend to think of individuals that they're going to be extroverted, they're going to automatically want to network. Well, sometimes if you have the data to prove, or you realize that certain learning styles are different, you're going to implement, like if you're doing a roundtable discussion, you're really trying to pull out information for individuals, and you find out that their learning style is more introspective, where they're more comfortable with digesting information, considering it alone before they speak. Then if I know that before we're going to that roundtable discussion, I'm going to pre-send the questions that we're going to be asking, so those individuals have a moment to think their way through it. I need to get that information out of their brains. But sometimes people aren't the extroverts that want to control the narrative in person. And some people also feel more comfortable with writing. So if you want the inside of their brains for this roundtable discussion about how we're going to make our product better, or whatever the reason that we're gathering is, you need to be considerate of those learning styles and those speaking styles as well. And that can be implemented in so many ways in your in-person environment, just by thinking your way through your audience.
Yeah, and personality styles as well. Like you brought up a good point as far as the not being an extrovert or introvert. And for introverts, I mean, like myself included, I'm an introvert. And so trade show environments, while they're amazing and awesome, and I love speaking to people, they can be very overwhelming.
Absolutely.
At times, right? Very overstimulating at times, and emotionally draining, as well, because there is so much to see and so many things pulling your direction. So what do you do to help people focus and hone in and give them that mental break that they might need?
Yeah, and I think we have event organizers especially have a tendency to just jam pack an agenda without those moments of breath. That moments of breath is good for anybody, regardless of personality types. But I think we do have a tendency to just put everything, we've got a breakfast, a lunch, a dinner, and then an after party and all of that. And regardless of personality types, that's exhausting. But especially for introverts, we start masking at, X many hours of being on the clock, because now we're faking it. So that becomes, then at that point it becomes a barrier to connection, because then I'm just masking my way through the rest of my conversations. It's not going on behind here. So really, ultimately, to kind of wrap it in a bow, is what can we do to remove those barriers to connection so that we make sure that we still ultimately serve the mission of why we're gathering, and then have those moments of connection together.
Wow. Really fascinating. Yeah. So you're currently developing or experimenting with AI in the event production space. What opportunities and challenges do you see for AI in planning large-scale, multi-day, complex events?
Yes, so it's really, AI is absolutely fascinating. I'm in the middle of this really interesting experiment through Club Ichi, which is a gathering of event professionals, a very large organization that gathers event professionals. We actually have a hackathon that's happening on September 24th, where we're going to showcase what we've learned. It's very meta. It's basically an event about how we created the event using AI about the event. So so very meta.
Very meta.
So it's been fascinating, because you can almost get overwhelmed by the number of tools that are just constantly coming out in the market.
Yeah, almost.
It can be overwhelming.
Yeah,
so
it can be, yeah.
These folks, we're all just event planners, right? We're all event managers of various roles and responsibilities, and we're coming together and taking the full stack of event production and using AI to implement various portions of the stack. We're probably about 4 weeks into this experiment, and one thing that seems to remain to be true is it's best to understand what problem you're trying to solve and then find a solution to solve that problem, as opposed to get excited by the new shiny thing and then just gravitate to the new shiny thing. Because if you're not careful, AI becomes a barrier to productivity in this case. Sometimes it becomes more complicated. But there really are some solutions that are fantastic at outsourcing some of your executive function, which is amazing. But ultimately, we are the ones that are crafting the strategy, the creative direction, the what, again, the why behind the what. So you have to think of those as tools. It's no different than when we all got really excited about computers. It's no different than when Excel, came out and all the accountants were freaking out because they thought it was going to, completely change everything and they're going to need accountants anymore. It's just another tool that helps us in what we do for a living, really.
All right. And so when you're helping organizations or companies create trade show activations, are you implementing AI technology into the event itself? Are you selecting and making the recommendations of what technology that they use at the trade shows so the clients aren't overwhelmed?
So what's interesting is a lot of the tools that event managers are using are implementing AI already into their system. So a lot of the registration tools, a lot of the event diagrams and all that like stuff that we do on a daily basis, they're implementing AI into that. What is something that we collectively need to decide is multiple things, is how are we going to use the security processes that an organization, say they have data security concerns, what are the barriers that we need to put about those data concerns, and what are we going to allow AI to have insight into is something that we really need to keep an eye on. But what AI is fantastic at doing for the event production standpoint is taking a bunch of data that, and from my world in event strategy, I can take a bunch of data and I can digest it in a very succinct way by using various AI tools, which is really makes life really interesting. And I often use AI as an external processing agent, as just kind of a coworker to help me understand better what I think about something.
Okay, just to help you process, your own thoughts, kind of integrate all the information that you have and just give you insights into possible possibilities. Yeah. I know I've heard of people using it as a therapist or as a friend or a coach or right.
Yeah.
Right.
And there are so many different types of AI. I think a lot of people think of just like the chat GPTs, of that language-based like communication, but there are so many different type of intelligent agents or intelligent systems that we can use that are AI enabled. So it's very, very important to think of it as complicated as a computer system is, because AI really is as complicated as a computer system is. There are multiple different types of levels and tools.
Yeah, but overall, it makes sense that integrating AI with event planning would help make your job a lot more efficient and save you a lot of time and like you said, process more quickly and come up with alternative scenarios and situations. And with so much virtual content out there, what role do you think in-person events will play in the future of B2B marketing and industry growth?
So I do think that in-person events are going to become the rare jewel of connection. So now we have the ability to easily put out a lot of digital content, and we exist, very frequently digitally. Like right now, we're digitally connecting, and that's wonderful and amazing and very powerful. We're learning more and more that younger generations are really, really loving in-person connections because there's a distrust of online content. So again, back to that squishy, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So
that makes sense.
the in-person environment really gives a brand the opportunity to develop those emotion-based reasonings for why they want to use your product, buy your product, use your service. So those in-person moments really are the diamond of all of the content that we can provide. And those in-person moments are becoming more and more valuable, I feel, moving forward with all of the online and virtual content.
Well, and that makes sense. And especially with, prevalence of deep fakes or being able to, you don't know who you're even talking to or there's that lack of transparency just by the fact that it's virtual. You don't really, get a sense of what a person is about or who they are, because you're missing that in-person, component. So I understand that really makes a lot of sense why events would be so valuable, would be that diamond for making connection and establishing trust and adding that other dimension of the squishy, like you say. The squishy dimension, yes. If you had to give CEOs and marketing leaders one piece of advice about balancing AI-driven efficiency with human-centered experiences, then what would it be?
I would say, to echo kind of that thought of make sure that you're using an AI solution to solve a real world problem and not just because it's the new shiny thing to use. I would also make sure that it does not then become a barrier to connection. So, how many times have you had a problem with something that you're like a system that you're using, and you're like, I'm just going to call somebody. Surely they can just walk me through this. And then you get on a phone system that's not a well designed phone system, and you're talking to, the robot, and you can't get to the customer
Oh, yes.
to
So
help you.
frustrating. So frustrating.
That
Yes.
is so annoying and so much a barrier to the service that organization was attempting to provide. So
Right.
you've got to be careful. There are ways that you can train the AI agents to be very intelligent and to have all of the information that you want it to have, but you have to have trained it in a way that it's going to be that, or it's going to be a barrier to connection. So, and I'm just thinking about like those AI generated chatbots and the AI generated systems like that.
Right. That
So
you
just
call in.
make
Yeah.
sure anything that you're implemented using artificial intelligence is not creating a barrier to what your organization's trying to do. So that's the piece that I think we easily get distracted by the new and shiny. And it's very important to just be considerate of what is the overall purpose of our whatever we do, and make sure that AI isn't taking over and putting a barrier there.
Yeah. That it is ironic that a lot of times you're calling in to solve a problem because you're frustrated, and then you end up more frustrated because there's you're not able to get that answer and that human connection. For leaders in manufacturing and industry, why should they view events as more than just a marketing expense?
I think it's really important to recognize that events can be drivers for a public opinion, sales engine primers, and internal team building, and even more. So, events can address a significant amount of need within an organization, both internally and externally. So, I really, really recommend that you think outside of the box for your events, and don't just do an event because you've always done one. Get really creative and really think through what problems could we actually solve by having a gathering about this, instead of just putting out a podcast, even, or instead of putting out a white paper, instead of putting out, can we actually address this with an in-person gathering instead?
Yeah. Are you seeing more C-suite leaders participating directly in events these days?
Yes. I think depending on the organization and ultimately the reason for the event. Team building, definitely. If an in-person moment with the C-suite, to help lead their team in the right direction, to make sure everybody's rowing in the right direction, I think is definitely happening more and more. Having the C-suite speaking on stages has always existed, but I think it's even more and more important, because I think us in general are really invested in organizations' leadership and what they think about things. So I think it's really important for them to have those moments, either on stage, in person, at events, to be included in the conversation, so that the buyers or the other businesses that are buying from them really understand the vision for the organization. I think it's more and more important that they're integrated within in-person environments, for sure.
Yeah. How do you see the role of events evolving in the next 5 to 10 years, especially as industries face longer sales cycles and growing complexity?
So I'm really curious to watch that, because I think that we understand now the importance of in-person connection, since we had that kind of taken away from us from a pandemic, right? Where we have this like really deep scar from what the experience was for our in-person gatherings to be taken away from us. To balance that out, we also have virtual gatherings and the convenience of those virtual gatherings and what those are. So there's almost a hybrid moment right now where we can gather virtually, and that is impactful. But those in-person gatherings, again, really, really, really do feel like the diamond in the crown of the marketing or the communications or the HR ultimate goals with the organization. Absolutely.
Yeah. Finally, what's one leadership lesson from your journey that you'd pass on to executives who are trying to maximize growth through strategic experiences?
So I would definitely say understand the why behind the what. You want to gather, but you need to take steps back and understand what problems are we solving? What are we doing for this gathering? And if you need help with kind of coming up with what that is, hire an event strategist that can really help dive into that. And that can then take that why behind the what and implement it in a really strategic way with that ultimate mission in mind. Those details will impact the ROI of the event, the ultimate goal of what the event was. So definitely just taking a moment. I think sometimes we just get so busy and going, and with a short time span. But if we just wait just a breath and go backwards and decide our strategy before we start implementing our event production, I think that's really, really important piece.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the skills that you're bringing to the table are so valuable. I think events are can be so much more complex than people realize, and having a strategy that you bring to the event and all of the things that you mentioned in this conversation can really boost the ROI. Really create a whole different experience and outcome than just having your, assistants go and show up and have a little booth with, your brochures.
Yeah.
You're missing out on a big opportunity if you're in front of your target audience. You put your best foot forward. It would be like going to an interview and just wearing, shorts and a t-shirt and not combing your hair, right? So it's like
100%.
Yeah, it's really showing up. And so Sara Beth, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and perspective today. And yeah, it really, you brought to the table how your ability to take something complex and intricate as a large scale event and tie it directly to business growth and trust, all the squishy things that we talked about, all the squishy things that are so super important and AI cannot create, right? It's like in this digital age where there's so many amazing things that AI brings to the table, there's still those squishy things that can't be replaced. So tell us where we can learn more about you, about the event you have coming up, and get a hold of you.
Yeah. So of course I'm on the LinkedIn, Sara Beth Raab, and my website is sbeventsboutique.com. And you can absolutely connect with me on either one of those places. And I would love to meet with you guys.
Awesome. And did you want to say anything about the AI event that you had coming up, where you can learn more about that?
So the AI event is hosted by Club Ichi. That's ICHI. You can find them on LinkedIn, and you can even follow Glitch Botson on LinkedIn, who is a bot that we created that is going to be dropping all of the information about the event, including how to sign up and everything. And it is a pay what you can event. And it should continue on. We're playing in the sandbox for months to come with different AI tools. And it really is an event about how to create an event using AI.
Very interesting. Yeah. So listeners, please make sure to follow and meet. What was his name again?
Glitch Botson.
Glitch Botson. Follow Glitch Botson on LinkedIn. Well, Sara Beth, thank you again for your time. It's been so fun getting to hear all that you're up to. And for our listeners, please make sure to follow and join us next time on Industry Ignited. And until then, stay bold, stay curious, and keep igniting industry.